Okay, so just a brief reminder where we were. I'm starting this off with geology because I learned botany in a state where geology has a very intense effect on plant life. I learned botany in California. Serpentine is a state rock there. A lot of you probably don't know what that is, which I don't think we get. We get like a little bit of serpentine in Texas, but not enough to influence the plant life. But in California, many of the plants spent millions of years evolving with serpentine, which is a really chemically toxic rock to plants. And so many of them evolved to tolerate it. Same thing in places like New Caledonia, Cuba, Borneo, et cetera. So I learned early on what effect geology can have on plant life. And then I learned, there's other types of plants that you get plants, other types of soil types, weathered from geologies that have endemic plants. These plants will only grow on limestone. These plants will only grow on gypsum, only grow on sand, et cetera. So the valley, we don't really have anything that's akin to that, but we've got certain affiliations between plant communities and the geology that grows in them. Before we get into geology, though, I just want to remind everybody, where we're at, right? I mean, you could see the eastern half of the country. This is a map of rainfall. Eastern half of the country gets way more rainfall than the west. You can see the climate slowly starts to dry out as you move westward. So you start getting plants that have more adaptations to drought and heat, like hairs on leaves, or some sort of drought dormancy strategy, or stem succulents like the cacti or members of Crassulaceae. So, and of course, we're down here. This is the hottest place I've ever been, the hottest place I've ever lived. I've been all over Mexico. I've been all over tropics doing tropical botany. I mean, I was just in Tucson. It was getting, they had sustained lows of like 30 degrees, 35. I mean, Phoenix might get individually hotter days, but where we live is the hottest place cumulatively speaking throughout the year in terms of accumulated heat days. And so that really makes me have a newfound respect for the plants that grow here. I mean, as climate change, ramps up, whether you believe in it or not, this line of where the continent starts drying out is supposed to move further east a little bit and a little bit further north. So we should be learning from plants like this how they do it, because it's really amazing. I mean, some of these plants just take the getting the piss beat out of them by the sun, and they thrive. So anyway, moving right along, let's look at the geology here. A quick introduction to basically what we live in, the Rio Grande Valley floodplain, why we get resacas, oxbow lakes. Don't mind this. This is just some BS. It was a screenshot. I don't know. They don't have enough money to buy, good stock educational videos. But anyway, there's a good portrait of the Rio Grande, Mexico on the right, Roma Bluffs on the left, and a beautiful Taxodium mucronatum, which ranges all the way down into Oaxaca and all the way up into Austin and San Antonio. So relative of redwoods. So, and that you can see, bald cypress that's close relative, the Louisiana cypress, Taxodium viscum forms knees. Taxodium mucronatum just forms these rebar-like roots that hold the riverbank together. Very important for stabilizing the soil. This is out by Salineno. This is just some dog who was hanging out with us. Like, remember him fondly. Anyway, geology map of Texas. I got these for sale for 10 or 15 bucks, whatever you got. You can see the bands in which the different rocks are. Youngest down here, oldest as you go further up. There's Enchanted Rock up there. That's old, really old rocks, some of the oldest in the state. But basically what we're dealing with, the resolution's not too great on this. I think I blew it up. What we're dealing with is all this stuff, right? And so why does this matter? Like, why does it matter? Why do I need to know? If you're into plants, why do I need to know what all this stuff is, right? Why do I need to know that MOG, it's M for Miocene, because that's the age, is the Goliad formation? Why do I need to know that OC, for Oligocene, that's that period, 38 million years ago, is the Catahoula formation? Why do I need to know that the Jackson group is what you get in Starr County and on the Roma Bluffs and all that? Because there's plant communities that tend to stick to those geologic formations. And it's really cool when you start noticing it. So this I showed, you can see this is a simplified map. This is really what's going on. You can see the Rio Grande is really carved away. The rivers carved away some of these massive deposits like the Goliad formation and filled it with quaternary deposits. Quaternaries last 3 million years. So these are all younger river deposits. And of course the river, because remember, like that image I showed you, it's changing course all the time. You got to think beyond the span of a human life. Instead of thinking at 80 years, may not change course while we're alive, but at some point it's going to change course again, over the vast span of geologic time. And so it's deposited all these sediments everywhere. That's why the soil is so rich here. So anyway, there you go, Jackson Group, aka the Roma Sandstone. You get, here's all the plants that you tend to find on Jackson Group sandstone. You find these old Crassostrea gigantea oyster shells with the sand, Eocene sand. So Eocene's like, 10 million years after the dinosaurs went out. Here's Catahoula Formation. It's this volcanic ash, at least where it's exposed in our region. It's this layer of volcanic ash. If you were to look at that stuff under a hand lens, you'd see little pumice. Looks like little pumice rocks, little crystals. And then here's Goliad Formation. Goliad Formation is a little bit older than this, but where it's exposed where we are, we're at about the 5 million year strata layer of the Goliad Formation. That's where you get all these cool pebbles that are rounded, obviously sourced from different mountain ranges. Maybe this red piece of chert broke off from a mountain range, 10 million years ago and was carried down river, from northern Mexico. Maybe this one came from West Texas. They're sourced from all over the place. They've been carried here by the river or by a river. I don't know if it was Rio Grande. We don't know. You need a time machine to figure that out. But you can see they all get cemented together here in the Goliad Formation. So this is notorious Goliad Formation rocks, right? You can see it cemented together with caliche. It's all different kinds of rocks, and they're all rounded. They all look like they've been polished in a tumbler, because in effect, they were. And some of these get really big, like big boulders that are rounded. You think how much energy, how fast and how much volume of water was the river moving that brought this thing here from, 200 miles away in West Texas from the mountain that it was sourced from. Really puts things in context. But anyway, here's the plants that you get associated with the Goliad Formation. Now you can see Catahoula Formation ends 23 million years ago. Goliad Formation starts, technically 13 million years ago, but for us, it's 5 million where it's exposed here. That's that notorious unconformity that I think it was Dr. Gonzalez at UTRGV discovered. So there's, all the time in between is missing. That's called an unconformity, 23 million to 5 million years ago. And it was probably scoured away by the river that deposited all this stuff. But either way, you could see some really cool plants, Astrophytum, Mannahaut walkeri, all those cool desert ferns, Myrioptera scabra, Eucnid lobata, which is really common in Saltillo. In Saltillo, Coahuila, Mexico, Eucnid lobata is a native plant that you see growing out of rock walls in abandoned buildings downtown. It's hilarious. It's a weed. It's a native weed that's colonized all these old buildings in downtown Saltillo. It's beautiful. Here, you only get it exposed at Santa Cruz, and it's growing out of this stuff. So let's look at some plants. So this is that Jackson Group sandstone, roughly 50 million to 40 million years old. You see those oyster fossils. And on this type of stuff, you're going to see a lot of cool plants like Asclepias prostrata, prostrate milkweed. Got quite a few money shots in here, that one. Growing on basically sand that's derived from weathered sandstone that was deposited in a 50 million year old shoreline of the Gulf of Mexico. You see that buffalo or guinea grass, whatever's invading it, but there's Asclepias prostrata, there's the fruit, really bizarre fruit structure on it. There's a seed. It's pragmatic, man. If I had more room, I'd do like a metric to foot conversion chart. And I was considering it. I'm like, I got to find a tattoo guy I'm sick of looking it up, more prostrata. Such an epic species. And it's remarkable how easy this species does in cultivation, too. I've got 3 in my house just growing in my yard. There's a Zapata bladderpod, Physaria thamnophila. And notice, this is the kind of stuff you see dealing with the heat. These are layers of trichomes, tiny hairs that give it that chalky blue color, make it able to take the heat. I got to keep an eye on the time because I could talk for 4 hours here. But there's the fruits on Zapata bladderpod. And how much time do I got? When am I up? 8:15? 8:30? Something like that? Anyway, people start walking out. I'm just talking to myself here still. Okay, there's Turnera diffusa damiana. There's Yucca trichuliana up close. I think this is one of the only plants that is like very intentionally pollinated by its pollinator, like not just passively, like a pollen grains on a leg get stuck to a stigma. Like the moth that pollinates yucca actually takes the pollen, wads it up into a little bowl, and it's a female moth always. She stuffs it inside that stigma and then puts some eggs in there So because her larva, in exchange for pollination, the yucca, quote unquote, lets her larva eat some of the seeds. And great case of coevolution and symbiosis. Synthlypsis greggii, another cool mustard, another cool brassica. This was a Ketopapa bellyoides growing on that Jackson sandstone. This was near Santa Margarita Ranch. Again, look at those hairs, those trichomes. Desert. I could see that plant in a pot in a nursery somewhere, and I'd know this thing evolved somewhere where it gets hot and dry. One of my favorite plants, highly underrated, Erythrostemon caudatum. I just germinated a couple of them. There's the plants. It's funny, some of the things that I see on it, I don't notice till later. Extrafloral nectaries or insects, ants in this case, whatever. A good macro lens, the importance can't be understated of a good macro lens. The glands on that. This thing, I mean, this thing stinks. I think it smells good, but it stinks if you touch it. Yeah, I'm going to get through like 1/10 of these photos, man. Aristolochia erecta, notice more hairs pollinated by fungus gnats. They got to go inside there. They get kind of trapped. They hopefully come out with some pollen, take it to another flower. But you can see it's growing on this sand. That sand is all weathered from the Jackson Group sandstone. So when I'm looking for plants, like I'll be places sometimes that, and I'll see those oyster shells and I'm like, there should be Zapata bladderpot here, or there should be peyote here, or there should be, I'll be in those gravel beds with Varilla texana. I'll say there should be astrophytum here. Yeah, this thing's a banger. There's so many cool Aristolochias. This is Aristolochia erecta. It's Dutchman's pipe is the common name. The genus Aristolochia, this genus has like 300 species in it, and they all look really cool. They all look weird. People think they're carnivorous. I found some really cool ones growing on gypsum in Nuevo Leon that U.S. Customs confiscated. I had them pressed in an herbarium press, and the meatheads there didn't know that what an herbarium was to begin with. And so this is Linum elongatum. This was on Frankinia johnstonia. There's another one. I just germinated some of these. This is another plant you see in saline areas on that sand. Now, none of these are like super strict edapic endemics. Like they're not super restricted to this soil, but they just what they tend to associate with. This is really cool. This plant I noticed when I was out looking at it. This is at another property. This is all Varilla texana, common associate of astrophytum, the star cactus. I noticed when I was looking at them that the flowers would wither, and then the corollas would fall off. That's the calyx. So this is the sepals. And then the 4 distal leaves, these things would just dehisce. Like they would just abscise off the plant really easily. And I got to thinking, I'm like, wait a minute, you know what? It kind of looks like a helicopter. I've seen that before. And then I realized, oh, that's how this thing gets around, is the fruit and the seeds are enclosed in this. The whole distal end of the branch dehisces and abscises from the rest of the plant. And then they hang out till you get a good wind. You get some really good wind in the valley, as I'm sure everybody knows. And the wind just takes these things and carries them off. And that turns into a little helicopter. It carries the seed off. Those things came up dense. I mean, I sowed only like 20 seeds. I think they all came up. Kind of cool to see. This thing that was registered for a while. This is now, all this area is demolished for a solar project. But there's petrified palm wood. In Starr County, there's a buried, probably a cypress, some sort of angiosperm wood, some sort of trunk buried in but you can see now we're off that Jackson group and we're getting more of these gravels, the Goliad gravels, all the black brush, but the whole stump was huge. That was northwest of Rio Grande City. And look at the thick layer of duff too. I mean, this stuff is so rich. I mean, we're trying to start this nonprofit down here. This land purchase in Roma, and I want to build a research station and I want to get soil scientists down here. I want people to study what's in this soil. The microbes are in this soil. I mean, that blackbrush stuff is so vital to some of the plants. There's a cool point we found. And then this is Yucca constricta, more of that Jackson Group sandstone. And then Thymophila tephroleukea, one of my favorite plants. I can't believe there's not more people growing this thing. But again, here it is growing on the sandstone. On the weathered sandstone, that same Jackson Group formations, all these cool, it's in the marigold tribe of Asteraceae, so it's got all these cool glands on it, smells great, really, really wonderful plant. And look how hairy it is. Thing looks like a damn Q-tip. I mean, it's been so subjected to natural selection in this heat. There's very good looking seeds, and I got a few to germinate. You can see it just looks like I mean, you know, I love this. I see this and I'm like, some people think that looks like hell. I'm like, that's an awesome plant because I know what it looks like. It's going to look good when it lights up. We're just in the dormant season. You know, you adjust to desert botany, but you can see you got all these little clumps just interspersed throughout there. Really cool. And there it is in a garden. You know, you give them a chance. You know, granted it's a messy garden, but you know, this thing gets water. It's got a much easier life, and it's just lush and flourishing. And you can see I got a bunch of other cool plants. Some horse cripplers, one of the 900 species or whatever of Pelosa cereus, Myrtillo cactus, whatever. So, and then just because it was next to it, Mandeville aeruginosa, which used to be, what is it, I forget, I forget the old name of it, macrocyphon, but moth pollinated. The moths love these things. So anyway, moving on to the Goliad formation really quick. There's those Goliad gravels. There's my friend Javier, photograph of Myriapteris scabra. There's the Taurus conformity. This spot, now with this, of course, you get plants like Astrophytum. I think that's a turd. Doesn't it look like a little mouse turd or something on top of it? That was this is from, I think, 2014, the first time I ever set foot in Stark County. But I mean, these gravel beds, I mean, you could see all that stuff was carried by a river and then just dumped. Whenever the river lost its energy, it dropped its load, you get these huge gravel beds that occur. And these plants just adapt. You know, I would have loved to see what that landscape looked like. It was, who knows what it was. There's Manahot walkery, which you also get, I tend to associate with the Goliad gravels growing out of rock walls, whatever. There's a nice fruit on it. Myriapteris scabra growing in a little crack right there. Teradaceae, known really easy for that family. It's got these pseudo-indusia, these lips that, you know, a lot of ferns have a indusium that kind of is like a little flap that protects where the spores come out. That whole family Teradaceae just kind of folds over the margins of the leaflets. You get a pseudo-indusia. This is near Santa Cruz, really invaded with buffalo, but a lot of cool thelocactus, you know, and a lot of cool other plants popping up right there. Astrolepis integerrima, one of the coolest fern genera, Astrolepis. A friend of mine was just in Costa Rica. Down there, they got another genus called Jamesonia, which looks like Astrolepis, but it looks more like a coral almost, like it's just these really skinny, tall fronds. But ferns that are adapted to desert living, which, you know, I was already familiar with this family learning botany out west because they're so ubiquitous. This cool liverwort, Mammillaria hyderi, thelocactus, but you could see, catching the theme, the Goliad gravels, rounded pebbles in a variety of different types, cherts, and you'll find basalts in there. And there's like basalt's a volcanic rock. There's no basalt in South Texas. That if you're getting volcanic basalt, is kind of an over redundant way of putting it. But if you're getting basalt, it didn't come from here. You know, this stuff was carried. And all these things are rounded, or it's just so cool. So those are the habitats I like, the little Astrophytum. I trying to recreate in my yard. There's the blessed shrine with Eucnid lobata hanging out, which again is that one that's a weed in Saltillo, Coahuila, Mexico. It's just like a really cool weedy native. Got to get a shrine in my yard. I don't know what for yet. I'll figure something out. We'll build a little shrine. We'll build a little grotto, you know. Nice peyotes right there on the oyster beds. I don't know why that's in there. That's a different formation, but either way. Massive old peyote growing out of Goliad. Gravels. Astrophytum. More Astrophytum. And then this was cool. This is, I think this is Hidalgo County, actually a little bit closer, but this is basically, I think it's the remains of an old quarry, but it's an old quarry that was probably quarried for the gravel deposits there, and then was abandoned and is just filled in with blackbrush. But I mean, some of this stuff is so cool. I mean, look at these, all these different cherts, and in West Texas, you know, out by like a place like Sanderson or something, you see this stuff at the source. It's a different kind of, it's pure limestone, pure white Cretaceous limestone. So before the dinosaurs got knocked out, and it's these voids get created in the limestone because it dissolves readily in acidic rainwater. Remember, rainwater is relatively acidic. So gypsum and limestone, they react with acidic rainwater, and given enough time, it creates little voids and trickles through. And then those voids later get filled in with some sort of siliceous deposit, just silica-rich deposit. That's where you get the cherts from. And then they just kind of get entombed in there. And then later on, when that limestone gets further weathered, those big nodules of chert get washed out of it, and that's what happened. Carried down here. Mentzelia oligosperma, right here. Mentzelia is a genus I knew already. I mean, I've probably seen like 25 different species of Mentzelia. I love them all. There's some really cool ones out west. I was surprised to see it here. These are the Velcro leaf family because all these little hairs are barbed and you can stick the leaves to your shirt like a piece of Velcro. Get some really mean ones in South America that are stinging. They're like nettles. Cool pencil cactus growing on the, and Mortonia gregii. This is kind of a cool one because the only times I ever see it here, is on top of these Goliad gravel deposits. And I've been on a bunch of different ones, sometimes legally, sometimes not. But you go out there exploring, looking for plants, and you'll see the gravels. You're on top of it. It's also nothing earth, and sure enough, you'll see this plant up there. From the red stems and the tiny white flowers and these kind of imbricate leaves. We get Mortonia utahensis further out west. You get Mortonia sempervirens out in West Texas. And when I was in Huasteca Canyon in the Sierra Madre of Monterrey, this thing was everywhere, just growing out of rock walls. I was out there, climbing on 20 feet above the ground, like risking death to try and photograph agave albopilosa, this really rare agave. And I look next to me and there's Mortonia gregii just growing out. I'm like, hey, okay, I know you. Growing out of the rock wall. There's the flowers. 5 stamens, sepals alternate with the petals, and you got a little 5-lobed stigma in there. You can see the nectar in that yellow ring too. Mexamalva philippes, germinated this, got this in my yard. That's a favorite. Really cool. Look at the nectar. I mean, you can see the nectar. It's, microliters of nectar, but it's enough to draw in pollinators to get them in there. Cuscuta ragnonii, it's kind of a rare one, little rare parasite. You can see there it's strangling a dahlia. Gauchnadia, now Nahuatlia. This is a favorite. I wish someone's got to crack the code on germinating these seeds. Very few people have been able to, as far as I know. And I collected some seeds and sent them to somebody at Missouri Botanical Garden, and everyone they looked in was empty. So it wasn't getting pollinated. But it's cool because this, how do I go back? The whole family the whole subfamily of Asteraceae, the sunflower family that this is in, is super diverse in Brazil, and all, like I saw a relative of this in Dominican Republic. So it's one of the more early evolving lineages of Asteraceae. Really cool. Peyote, Manfredo longiflora, all on the Goliad. Gravels. Escobaria, Emscoteriana. Coraphantha macromeris. You want me to stop or go back? Let me know. This is Coraphantha macromeris. It's got big pink flowers when it goes up, and you'll see clumps of them. I mean, quote unquote, old growth ones that are like this big. But this is, I mean, all these have been taken a knockback from feral pigs and probably javelina too. This is Ancistrocactus shiri. This forms huge potatoes in the ground. And I didn't realize that until we were rescuing a bunch of these from a border wall project. And digging them up, you'd see they'd have this root that goes down the intestine and then forms a big potato. And I was like, oh, that's why this thing is always growing. One of the few cacti you see growing out and exposed, in Starr County summer heat without any shade cover, because it's got that little potato it can resprout from. And easily confused with it is this one, Hematocactus setaspinus. They both have these little recurved spines, but Hematocactus has ribs, and Ancistrocactus has little tubercles, little projections. Doesn't have the I don't know, sometime in the last 10 years, last 8 years, probably the last 3 or 4 years, Echinocerius fitchii. What's notable about this soil too is, I mean, it's funny too, because when I explain to people, all these people who are obsessed with peyote and blah, blah, live out west in the deserts in Tucson, whatever, and it's such a vastly different desert out there that when you tell them where, plants like peyote and astrophytum grow and what the soil is like, it blows their mind, because out there, it's all volcanic sourced. There's very little organic material. Whereas here, this is almost all organic material. It's calcium carbonate, so you've got weathered limestone in there too, but you've got a lot of decomposed organic material in the soil, and it forms this clay. It's like this thick clay. It seems like it would be a nightmare, like a horticulturalist nightmare, and it kind of is in a pot, but when in the ground, it's so vital to everything that grows here. I mean, you get lichens forming on this soil. That's why I want to study the microbial life. The soil here is just so unique. It's powdery when it's dry. It's super clumpy and clay-like when it's wet. You could see, I mean, just imagine an old river flowing right through here, just however long it took to just dump these gravel loads. More astrophytum, horse crippler, some wonderful lichens and an astrophytum, more astrophytum. This is all lichen, the whole soil's alive. You're probably looking at 30 or 40 species at least of different organisms there. Oligomerus linifolia. I just put this in there because this is a weird plant. Residaceae is the family. It's a monocot. It's related to grasses. This is a plant that natively occurs in Iran, California, and also South Texas, apparently, which I was kind of blown away to say. I'm like, how the hell did Oligomerus linifolia? I don't know the common name. I don't. Weird bastard. I don't know. Whatever you want. It's an annual. Some of that weathered chert, all these chert tools, just so abundant. On top of one of those Goliad gravel hills where it's all leucophyllum and Mortonia. You got Helietta down here. Rutaceae, wonderful Helietta. Nicotiana obtusifolia, it's an annual. Nicotine, I'm pretty sure it's an annual. I'm just showing plant photos now, basically. There's no underwriting concept anymore. We've just kind of devolved into rambling. Billy Turner, a Helleri, cool little mallow that you see growing with. And again, I mean, what's cool, what I think is cool about this is that look at these leaves. I mean, this thing is thriving. It's alive. It's flowering, but it looks almost half dead. That's its strategy. It's got these leaves that are covered in those stellate trichomes that are synonymous with the mallow family, and then it just kind of shrinks them up and curls them up and minimizes how much surface area is exposed to the sun. Quincula lobata, always a favorite. I'd love to see more people growing that. Quincula lobata, it's a nightshade. It's got those radar dish corollas. It's basically just 5 petals fused into a little radar dish. It's full anthesis. 6 or 7 lichen species on blackbrush, pencil cactus, Echinocereus poselgri. Cool to see a cactus that just uses its spines as to help camouflage itself in with its habitat rather than as any kind of armed defense. And this thing always blows my mind. I mean, I've been to places where I know it grows. I'll look for the individual plant that I've seen before underneath the bush or series of bushes that it was growing in. I won't be able to find it. And then I go and I'm like, oh, someone poached it or a pig got it. And then I go back 3 months later and I'm able to find it or it's flowering. It's there. I just missed it. I mean, they're so easy to lose track of. This was at a ranch in north of Rio Grande City. Massive clump of Echinocereus enneacanthus. Beautiful. How old is that? This property was really well maintained. Really, really well maintained. Little guy hanging out. Just wildlife photos. What is it? The Texas, oh God, I forget the name. It's a native, why am I drawing a blank on this? Yeah, there you go. There you go. Banded gecko, right. Forget who that guy was. That was really nice to see. I love spiders. Little guy hanging out. Look, I love that reptiles can seem so skeptical sometimes. Isocoma coronapophilia. This was cool because I know the genus Isocoma there's like 5 or 6 species that grow in California. It's another one I'd love to get in my yard. Beautiful indigo snake, temperate indigo snake. Endemic. This is Diplocentris diablo, which Ken actually told me about. I didn't even know it was. We just went to look for it at the type locality. It was only discovered in the 80s. Really cool little scorpion. Went out there with the UV light, and sure enough, there it was. And then one of the tree crickets. I just put them in there because they're such a nice white noise machine at night, and they're one of the most pleasant aspects of my yard to me. Is these guys. That guy was so loud right there when I took this photo. Sideroxylon, Celestrinum, Coma, and Medrinoa palmeri, another underappreciated aster. And let's see what else. Like 20 minutes left. Really nice stone tool. You can see Hectia glamerata in the background. Another Hectia glamerata, that bromeliad. It's a relative of pineapple. It's another plant that's way more common as soon as you cross the border and get into the mountains. And then some of the cool, we don't get many mushrooms here, but this is Montagnia arenaria. Arenaria implies sand. It's growing in sand. It's, all the desert mushrooms you see have the same strategy. They're not like mushrooms you're going to see in a temperate rainforest of the Pacific Northwest, where the cap opens up and it stays moist and it's just dropping spores. What the desert mushrooms do is they pop up, they almost immediately dry out, and then their spores get around when they're dry. This thing has millions of spores in it. An animal comes by, knocks that cap over, black powder goes everywhere. That's how it gets. And then the spores just wait in the soil till a good rain, and they can germinate and then start decomposing whatever organic goes in the ground. Podaxis pistillaris, same thing. The cap doesn't even open in this, because what's the point? You're not trying to get. It's not going to be wet enough for you to, open your cap up and disperse your spores. You just dry out, look like a little rod or some shriveled corn on the cob. And then you dry out, animal comes, kicks you over, you break that thing open, there's millions of spores that just fly everywhere. And this one's cool, Baterioides digoetii. I've also seen this in Baja California Sur, in the deserts down there. It's a subtropical desert mushroom. Same thing, cap doesn't open. There's no gills there. I mean, there's gills inside, but cap doesn't open, just pops up, immediately dries out, and then that's how the spores get around. Really cool. Anyway, and then I did a little piece on blackbrush. So I'll end this here in like 20 minutes. Because this is such an underappreciated plant, and sure, it looks mean as hell, but this is what enables so many of the other plants to live here. I mean, it's a overstory for so many. At least when you go further west to Starr County and Del Rio and up to the Pecos River. I mean, this is the cornerstone of an ecosystem. I mean, this is really a keystone species, and the smell of these things when they go off is just intoxicating. When they bloom, like right around March, you can see this is already forming fruits. All right, and it's crazy to think too that a fruit's an ovary, right? That ovary is inside. Each one of those little flowers has an ovary. Only a few select ones get pollinated, but the size that it grows in such a short amount of time, from a few millimeters to about 3 or 4 inches, 5 inches long, is pretty wild. And then I wonder about all the stuff that's going on. The phytochemistry, these things have evolved to deal with the fact that they're one of the most abundant green things on the menu if you're an herbivore, in a pretty barren, hot environment. The microbial associations they have, the root nodules, because they're in the pea family, they're obviously, like a lot of things in the pea family, they associate with nitrogen fixing bacteria. But it's cool. I mean, the leaves aren't even emerging yet, and this thing's already just lit up. They smell so good. So many of those legumes are just incredible. And you can see the whole background is just lit up. So it used to be Acacia rigidula, now it's Vechelia, because it turns out, it wasn't as closely related to the original acacias as we thought. And I mean, all the duff it creates, I mean, everything. The duff it creates, I mean, I'll see feral pigs have been doing a lot of damage to cacti, but some of the places I'll still find peyotes and the Echinocereus pentalobus and other stuff is in these little cages formed by the multiple shoots coming up from these plants. So, I mean, if it weren't for the blackbrush, we'd have a lot less diversity. To be, all the invasive pigs, et cetera, would have a lot more, have reduced the diversity a lot. This is Parkinsonia texane, another one of my favorites, this thing does nuts in a landscape, man. It's crazy. It grows so fast. I planted a little seedling in a 1 gallon, and in a year it got up to here. It hasn't bloomed yet. It'll probably bloom this year, but just provided immediate screen, so I don't have to be visually assaulted by the parking lot across the street. And when it goes off, I mean, it's just lit up. Mimosa texana, another cool legume, not to be confused with going the wrong way. Not to be confused with Caliandra, which is another cool one. Caliandra doesn't have any spines. Mimosa's got those little recurved spines. So it's little nuances. A lot of the legumes look the same. They've all got those pinnate leaves, but you just look for the little nuances. Are the spines there? Are the spines at the nodes? Are they in between the nodes, etc.? But they're all in, all those cool legumes are in the mimosa subfamily for the most part. Well, Parkinsonia is in a different subfamily, but Thelocactus going off. Cool Thelocactus with a nice yote. And then I always forget the name of this genus of Polygalaceae that's growing there, but just incredible diversity, so much of it understudied. Aclysanthes obtusa, obviously going for moth pollination, blooming at night, long tube, just this perfect fit for a moth proboscis, white flowers. It's not, I mean, it always blows my mind. I mean, you go to like a shopping center here and people are planting these tacky palm trees and God forbid crepe myrtles. Oh, horrible. And we've got such cool native plants here. I'm like, what these people just don't see it. They haven't seen it, man. They haven't. Mammillaria prolifera, Chromaria ramos. This is Chromaria ramosissima. This is a cool genus. I've seen some really weird ones in Chile. It's related to, or it's restricted to North and South America, and it's related to creosote bush and guaiacum. It's in that same order. But what Chromaria does, and this is the same thing. This is a plant that, like, you talk to most people here, they'd be like, it's just brush, you know, because it's not notable when it's not blooming. It's just, you got fascicled leaves. They're only about that big. It's really easy to overlook. But when you look at those flowers up close, it's taken 3 of these petals and it's morphed them into oil producing glands. So they produce lipids, and they have a really specific relationship, all right, with a certain kind of bee in the genus Centris. And that's the only bee that pollinates these things, because it collects those lipids, those oils, and I think it uses it to feed its larva, whatever. But regardless, I mean, it's a really cool relationship that's probably taken millions of years to evolve between this and a specific kind of bee. And it doesn't provide nectar, it doesn't smell, it just puts this oil out there, and then so anyway, this is Chromaria ramosissima. It gets about yay tall, but there's some down in Nuevo Leon. What is it? Chromaria. It's like cystic. It's a big shrub. It's like this, and the flowers are beautiful, like huge. You know, 400 miles south of here. And then yeah, it's all over California, Southern California, does etc. Accordia runcinata going off. That's a nice one. Mutisioi. This is related. This is Asteraceae. This is a sunflower family, but it's related to a whole subfamily that's primarily in South America. All right, but there's a couple genera like Accordia and Trixis, and a handful of others that are in North America. And you can tell that they're in the Mutisioid subfamily, named after the genus Mutisia, because they've got these, you look at these individual corollas, right? Like you got this is not one single flower. This is a composite flower. It's composed of probably 40 different flowers in there. Each one of these little rods corresponds to one flower, individual flower. So like this is an individual flower, this is an individual flower. And in the sunflower family, like if you look at a sunflower, you look at the individual flowers in a sunflower, the corollas have 5 lobes. It looks just like 5 petals, little star-shaped yellow petals. This doesn't have 5 lobes. It's got 1 lobe, and then it's got, I think there's 2 in the back. So it's a really unique flower structure, and that, of course, that's a trait inherited by everything in that subfamily, Mutisioideae. So it's kind of cool. You think about, well, most of the families in South America, how to get up here, you know? Where did it first show up? Here's Chromaria again. A nice passion flower. That was the Tenualoba. Yeah, and one of the Carlorhizia species, I forget which one. There's that Mandevilla blooming. I think we're about done with this. How much time we got? 15 minutes. Okay, we'll do a different. Let's go to a different. Actually, maybe I can, you know what? Let me show a couple more of these. When I want to switch, how do I do it?
Minimize this guy.
Yeah. Oh, and it's already set up? Okay, cool. And Cistrocactus, oh, look at all those juicy fruits, each containing hundreds of seeds. I love that plant so much. Nice Sideroxylon, nice coma. Yeah. I don't know why the hell I put that in there. All right, peyote conservation. I'll do this really quick because this is kind of near and dear to my heart. So I think a lot of people forget that, you know, it's not just habitat destruction that's hitting this plant, which is, I mean, the fact that this is a psychoactive plant is the least interesting thing about it to me. You know, what really strikes me about it is that it's a spineless cactus that has evolved this weird phytochemistry that is somehow able to keep herbivores off of it. You see it all the time. You'll see them in habitat where something took a bite out of it and then spit it out. It's pretty hilarious. Like a rabbit or something. And then it's got this huge battery of a taproot, which enables it. I mean, you could take one of these plants, lock it in a closet for 3 years, not give it any light, take it out, and it would start growing again. I mean, that's with most cacti, but peyote especially, because it's got this huge battery of a taproot. But a lot of people forget that there's a whole church that's dedicated to annually harvesting this thing. So no matter what, there's going to be an annual harvest on it. Now, if it's done sustainably and cut above the stem, it's totally fine. But, you know, if you cut it too low or you dig up the whole plant, it's gone. And then you're then depriving the habitat and all the critters that depend on these things, the things that pollinate it, the things that eat the seeds, whether it's birds or ants, of those plants. And so this is a chart showing the total of peyote buttons sold. Records stopped being kept after 2016. By Texas Department of Public Safety. This is all, of course, legal. This is as it should be. I mean, this is not a dangerous substance, and it's vital to the Native American church, to the Native American religion, and it's what kept people together, despite the okay, it's what kept people together despite the massive, basically the genocide that was inflicted upon them, and it's a really beautiful ceremony, and I've had an opportunity to witness a handful of them. But regardless, this is important to this culture, to this religion. And so no matter what, there's going to be an annual harvest. There's licensed peyoteros. They pay people to go out and cut. And then, you get native tribes coming down here from Canada, from Washington, from Idaho, from all over Oklahoma to come pick their own medicine and have their ceremony. So when you've already got this, that's one pressure on it, but it can be done sustainably. But then you've got this other pressure now, which is the sprawl that's hitting southern Texas and hitting Starr County and hitting Rio Grande City, and everyone thinks they're going to make money selling their family ranch, cutting it up into 10-acre plots and selling it out for tract housing. Never mind that there's not going to be any water here in 5 years. And so, but who cares? We don't need to think about the future, right? America's about short-term gain, long-term loss. And so you add that together and you start seeing drastic declines. These are just photos of a ceremony I took pictures of north of Rio Grande City. So you add these things together and you start getting massive pressures, not to mention the whole corny psychedelic renaissance. And there's all these drug bros who are really interested in this plant now and don't care about whether, they're getting sustainably, grown plants or whatever. And so you've got massive pressures on this species. And so you've seen drastic reductions in this species, just like you have with every other cactus species, basically, except for prickly pear and tasajillo. Sometimes I wish there was pressure on them. I love them, but they're just yeah. Anyway, this is probably one of the largest peyote. This is all one single plant. This is on a well-protected ranch in northern Starr County that the landowner was kind enough to let us on and take us around and show us this. And he was really, insistent, of course, that we not share locations, which of course we didn't. But it's been 5 years since I've seen this. But this still rings, this gives you a glimpse into the past of what it was once like here. And this is what you read on historical accounts of this plant, is that there used to be mattresses of it everywhere. I mean, literal, just gardens of this stuff. And probably, God, think about all the other species, the Cainoceras pentalophus, the astrophytum. I mean, just what this place looked like 200 or 300 years ago, hell, even 50 years ago, always blows my mind. It's just incredible riches squandered for Dollar Generals and parking lots. But that's kind of all over America. Regardless, I don't want to get too negative. I'll say that for a different crowd. But regardless, this gives you a glimpse into what things were once like. I mean, this has never been harvested by peyoteros. This has never been cut. This is probably been in this family for 4 or 5 generations, and there it is, just growing in these muds with this mesquite duff around it. And oh yeah, they blew it. But a lot of cacti from the Sierra Madre, which, remember, plants don't respect geopolitical boundaries. We're basically Mexico. So a lot of plants from the Sierra Madre, which starts a couple 100 miles south, 100 miles south of here, their season's March. They're adapted to going off in March. It's still kind of dry, and that's when a lot of them bloom. But peyote and a few others, because they've got that massive root. I mean, this thing, it's got the massive stem. It looks like a giant D-cell battery. Just it can flower whenever. Once it gets some rain, if it's warm enough out, it flowers. Doesn't matter if it's April or if it's October or whatever. And this is actually at a person's plot that was saving some of them from a bulldozer in Rio Grande City. You can see there's astrophytum in there too. And so you can see, look, there's another example. This was on a hunting lease that I went to with my friend Carlos. And you could see, this is where I saw, I mean, you could tell the pigs had been doing a lot of damage because the diversity was reduced. I mean, anytime I'm in a landscape like this and I don't see cacti, I know that it's diminishing returns, that I'm just shifting baselines, basically. At one point there was cacti there, but because either poaching or feral pigs or some sort of disturbance, it's been reduced. And so that was the case at this point. But at this locale, but just a forest of blackbrush, a corn maze of blackbrush. But then you'd come to these little spots where in between the multiple stems of the blackbrush, you could see where they had acted like a cage to protect this. And there was also a Echinocereus pentalophus there. It looks like green ropes, like a Medusa head just sprawled out on the ground that had been protected by the blackbrush. And that was part of what, kind of showed me no one's messing with Echinocereus eniacanthus with those spines. The pigs tended to leave it alone. But this was such a cool region. I mean, I don't know if the blackbrush, if that was natural, if it was recolonized after the land had been root plowed, but it was a corn maze of blackbrush. It was so cool. There's a Echinocereus pentalophus. All the lichen diversity on the blackbrush. So anyway, yeah. So the whole thing with the peyotes, and the astrophytum especially, that is close to my heart. What's important to me is conserving these things, making sure that I'd like to see ideally there's a way that where it's, and I don't expect this to happen in Texas certainly, but where it's legal for people to grow and maybe get the NAC, the Native American Church, to realize there's these things can be grown and planted ex situ. I was on the Tohono O'odham reservation in southern Arizona, and I saw this elder invited me to, this old gentleman invited me to his house. He's like, I've got a bunch that I grew. He goes to peyote ceremonies. He's probably 65. I think he was like the head of the head, forget the name, but he was the head position for the tribal authority. And we went to his house and he had like 500 peyotes just growing in volcanic soil in Tucson and thriving and doing great. They had a nice blue wax over them that they produce naturally, so I mean, there's alternatives to poaching habitat. And then overall, I would just love to see more habitat conserved here and protected, not just for peyote, but for other plants. I always use peyote though as that gateway drug, no pun intended, to get people who may not otherwise care about it involved. Like, oh, I'm interested in peyote because it's psychoactive and it's kind of mythical, and no one really knows much about it. Okay, yeah, I'll get you in the door. Come on. We're going to show you some other stuff too. We're going to see what else is cool about this landscape, like blackbrush. That's my goal. I'm like a salesman trying to get them in the door. Maybe they're interested in peyote. Later on, they're looking at blackbrush and having a new reverence for all the cool species growing here. But look at that duff too. I mean, you got to think, there's how many microbes are decomposing that? What species are the microbes? What else do they do in the soil? How do they interact with the roots of the plants? There's so much going on here that we don't know. So there's a flower on one of them. You can see there's some old seeds too. It's kind of cool. And then I got a whole nother, that's a nice photo too. And this is so this is an NAC harvest. This is a peyotero. And he was showing me this, being like, what am I supposed to do with this? Look at this. These plants are plants that never should have been taken. First off, they're dug up. Second, they're way too small. I mean, it's just, this is what's going on, but this is what is still, I mean, and this is all perfectly legal. This is all, there's a religion, and I think that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But the point is like, why are people doing this? Like what point? You're not supposed to dig up whole plants. You're supposed to sustainably cut them. You're not supposed to remove. This is looting from habitat. This is denuding habitat. This is stealing from other things, other life forms that need it. These are actually from a rescue where there's now a huge solar project started by BP. This guy was actually, I kind of can't stand him anymore, but I really respect what he did. These were all getting planted back in the ground. There's one that was cut, God knows when, probably in the 70s or 80s. This is a little Native American church card. There's a big one. And so this is, and you can see he's got them here and he's got water jugs there. And those are cut ones that he's rerouting. And this is where they're going. He's replanting them in the ground. I think he's planting them way too close together. I think he should be mixing them up with other species, but regardless, at least they're not getting destroyed, which is what would have happened to them. This is the spot where these came from. There was a bunch of astrophytum too, is all a giant solar project now in Starr County. You could look it up on Google Maps. It's called Starr Solar Project. It's all that land was destroyed. We've got drone footage of the bulldozers destroy. I mean, it's tragic. And how is that legal? How does that, I mean, whatever. I mean, we all live in South Texas. We're used to it at this point if we're paying attention. There's a little phyllo cactus blooming. But yeah, so this was a replanting. And you can kind of see right there that battery, that D cell battery root, more replanting. See, he's planting them way too close together. Regardless, I did get him to plant some astrophytum in there too. This is actually cool. This was a pollinator I'd photo. Anytime I see something pollinating any of the cactus species, I love astrophytum too. I take a photo of it. This turned out to be a very little known beetle called Acmeodera opunchi, after opuntia, the prickly pear. And it was, I think it was only described in 1963. And I reached out to the entomologist that I found on iNaturalist and collected frozen specimens of these guys and sent them to him. And I guess he just put them in his herbarium, but there weren't many collections of that beetle. And this beetle, actually, it turns out that in the larval stage, and this shows you how connected everything is. In the larval stage, this beetle needs dead wood of Carwinschia or blackbrush to eat. It lays its eggs in the wood, and you could set I had a big pile of firewood that I was gonna, I'm like, oh, one day I'm gonna have I get a fire pit. I'm gonna burn. I had a bunch of mesquite and other stuff, and I was out there one day and I heard these little scratching sounds. And what the fuck is that? I go out there and I look, and there's just little bits of I see these holes in all the little logs that I had, and there's little bits of sawdust coming out, and I'm like, God damn it, I can't burn that stuff now because I want to have these things around. It wasn't this species, but it was some other cool, native beetle. I'm like, I want to figure out what it is. I don't want to burn it now. Damn it, I gotta. And then I started collecting more wood for them too because I wanted to see more of them. Oh God, there's a cool little. Oh, wait, hold on. I didn't even see that little bee. That's another bee in there. We have some really cool solitary bees down here. And so we came back after saving a bunch of plants from the border wall project, where, I mean, it was heartbreaking. And there's photos, I don't know if we'll get to them, but of like phyllo cactus just crushed in a tire tread of a bulldozer. But we came back to this guy's ranch afterwards, this little sanctuary, and all these things were flowering, kind of like a way of saying thank you. We've been out there all day. It's like 99 degrees. Yeah, so this is all one plant, actually. I don't know where I think he got that at that same solar project. I mean, that thing, if you read about that solar project, it's heartbreaking, man. It's so much and there was astrophytum there too. It was, you don't care. But this is just down. I took a picture of this because this is like 100, 200 feet away from the garden that he had, and these are all just natural. And you can see what happened. I mean, this is a little bit downslope, a foot or two downslope. The garden's back here. Rains came, you get a hard rain, it just runs off, and it carried the seeds down just like it did these benches, these waves of debris, and that's where they landed, and then they just started germinating on their own. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Is like this plant, so many plants shouldn't be rare. they're so adapted to this climate and this landscape and this soil, they shouldn't be as rare as they are. Forget what that bee was. It's on INAT. Oh, and then this one. I'm glad we made it to this before I have to end it. This I was looking for. This was like the holy grail to me. So this is Euphorbia, and they get a lot taller than this. This is Euphorbia antisyphilitica, because at one point it was thought that it cures syphilis, or I don't know what the hell the etymology is. They used it for soap making, ethnobotanically, and for candle wax, but you mostly get it in West Texas. This, I had heard that, there was a collection from UTRGV herbarium from the mid-1970s of a collection of this in Stark County, but of course there's no GPS coordinates. There wasn't really GPS back then. There wasn't even, I don't even think there was any UTM data or anything. It just said, Northwest Stark County, north of Roma, whatever. So I was like, God damn it. And then the guy who was, this is on the ranch, this is all destroyed now too. This is a solar project. But when he was out there digging plants, he came upon this and he brought me a piece of it. And I said, that's Euphorbia antisyphilitica. That's like the long lost South Texas population. It's really weird for this to be here, because where it grows in West Texas is a vastly different landscape. It's drier, it's colder. You find just colonies of this stuff. Just looks like someone took a broom, flipped it upside down and stuck it in the ground, because it's just a bunch of little blue straws sticking up, getting like this tall. So anyway, he found this plant. Now it's destroyed. But he found it, and I went out there with him. It was like July. It was like 110 degrees, just total insanity. Like at some point, like drinking water doesn't even do anything. You have to have a cooler. It's got to be cold water, or else you'll die. You have to cool down every 10 minutes, get ice cold water. But there was colonies of this stuff growing out there, and the way it grew was so different from the way it grows in West Texas. It was growing in the shade, just like the cacti do, of larger shrubs, of all the brush. And I was just so taken with it, man. It was so cool. I mean, and then I talked to a friend, Nathan Taylor, who studies Euphorbia, this genus Euphorbia, which is a huge genus. There's like 900 species. Some of them look like cacti and get big. Some are little spurges that grow in the ground. And he said, actually, that's probably not antisyphilitica, even though it's been lumped in with it. Look at the difference in flowers. And he showed me, I'm a jackass. I should have put a photo in there that showed the flower comparison, but the flowers on both these, on this and antisyphilitica, are vastly different. You can see there's old stems here. It's just coming up in a black brush. So it's probably either a new variety or it could be a new species. I don't know if anyone's sequenced the DNA yet, but the ecology of it was totally striking to me, because you go to West Texas. I mean, this is all over Big Bend. I don't think it even affiliates with necessarily lime. I think you'll see it growing on volcanic too, not just limestone. But the ones in West Texas look different. These are dark green. The ones in West Texas are blue. They've got that thick coating of wax. That's why they were used for making candles. Yeah, but it's not. It's probably a different species. I mean, the flowers look way different. And this is in cultivation here. I mean, we've got native plant people growing it, but
what would be the best thing for the planet?
If it's a spot where you can't water, I don't know, probably black brush or something like that. But I don't know if it's the West Texas, Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Right. Well, if it blooms, you can look. The West Texas ones have, they're not petals, they're cyathial bracts, but they spread open like that. Really beautiful. They're tiny little flowers. They're really pretty. And these have like the whole structure of the cyathial bract, which would be analogous to petals, is different. It looks like a little upturned handle that's erect. It's so striking. That's why I'm kind of like, why did no one catch this before? Why is this not antisyphilitica? Either way, it was pretty cool to see it here. And who knows, like, was it brought here because native people were using it at one point for something and they planted it, or is it just part of the population that grows further down in Mexico, or what? But either way, it's cool. It just doesn't grow out in the open, it grows under the shrubs. And it forms these little, colonies. I mean, you can see but again, in a cultivated landscape, remember all the stuff that grows in the shade here, in a cultivated landscape where it can get water, whatever, you probably don't need to grow it in the shade, or it can take maybe a little bit more sun. So this was the road. It was just growing just right here, just all over, just all through it, all dense. Well, Louis is getting antsy. We got to end it soon. So Yeah, that's all that euphorbia, yeah. More Gochnati. You know, what was I doing here? Oh, okay, there's a cool liverwort. I forget what the hell was that? That's a moss. Anyway, there we go, astrophytum. How much time do I got? I got to end it soon or what? You know what? Let's go. You guys want to see astrophytum or do you want to see what I did with my house? That's like a year of growth. I mean, that's just like I spend every day out there. That's 1 year. Yeah, that's 1 year. And it's so I love it, man. I've got 3 different species of lizards, probably 40 different species of butterflies, and who knows how many moths. Um, and it's cooler here. It's yeah, yeah. It's cooler. Where were you when I was doing it? Was I blocking your way for the rest of it? You didn't miss the first part, did you? Anyway, so it smells great because I wish someone could explain transpirational cooling to the municipal heads of places like McAllen and Mission and whatever, because it's a real thing. That's what swamp coolers do. You turn your yard into a swamp cooler, it's going to be 20 degrees colder, or not colder, but cooler than the rest of the landscape. So when it's 110 degrees and because you got to think, all these plants have tiny little stomata, tiny little gas pores on the undersides of their leaves. They're taking in CO2 and letting out oxygen and water vapor. And as they let out water vapor and it turns into a gas, it cools the landscape. You get millions and billions of stomata doing that, which is what you see here, hundreds of millions of stomates. You get transpirational cooling. You ever ride your bike or walk by a parking lot like the one across the street versus walking by a field that's overgrown with a bunch of baccharis and sunflowers, whatever, in the summer. At sundown, you can feel the difference. Once the sun is gone, the field is immensely cooler versus the parking lot is just a space heater and it just continues to radiate heat until 2 or 3 in the morning. This is really easy stuff. I don't know why it escapes the minds of so many civic planners, or they just don't care. I mean, they probably just, have other things they're interested in. But anyway, so my yard is way cooler than the surrounding landscape. It sounds awesome. Those little tree crickets keep me up. I go out and hang out with my daughter. We look at lizards, play with bugs. She likes looking for roly-polies. I get all kinds of cool birds hanging out. And this is a year. I mean, this is not, anyway, so that's that. It's dense. You can see the hedge clippers get put to good use. There's that Thymophila. I got a little Hesperello in the background. Agave macroacantha grew from seed I got in Puebla, Mexico. Myrtillo cactus, the blueberry cactus, beautiful, wonderful fruits. I was able to keep this alive despite the freeze we had. It got a little bit of frostbite on the edges of the ribs, but I wrapped it in frost blanket. It came through fine. You can see I got that Candelilla back there. Adelia Vasey. I pack it dense. I don't believe in uniform spacing. I don't believe in neatly spacing things. I don't believe in spreading things out. If you're planting a tree, people say it grows big. Don't plant. I don't care if it grows big. In 20 years, it's going to be big. Right now, I want cover. I'm going to plant it dense. If I got to take something out later, that's fine. I like it dense. I like having cover. I like providing cover for wildlife. I'm really trying to get people away from that English Victorian garden. You go to like a bank landscaping. I want to die. I see these things that are just planted 2 feet in a neat spaced line, neatly spaced. It's very regimented and sterile and it's perfect. It makes me feel so controlled and safe. This is a little, you could see this, I let this get a little out of hand. This was all gravels that I wouldn't say I stole them, but they were, they were abandoned in an empty lot, and so I took them. I got Obregonia growing there, a whole bunch of cool little cacti, Coryphantha macromeris. Yeah, does it get weeds and stuff? Yeah, you go, you pick weeds. You get to spend time in the garden. It's fine. What are you crying about? It's what you do. I feel better doing this than I would mowing the lawn. I mean, there's a bunch of Mammillaria hyderi, a couple of those I've had for like 4 years. And I was like, God, I don't know what to do with them. And I was like, wait, why am I keeping them in a pot? Why don't I just create what I love seeing in nature, bring nature home. So I put a bunch of those Mammillaria there, and you can bet your ass I'm going to be taking all the fruits and collecting the seeds and giving them to people and growing more. This is Stenocereus gummosus. This is what's known as the galloping cactus. It grows on the coast of Baja. And it's one of my favorite cacti. It is so weird and bizarre. I've got a picture of my dog Jack standing next to one that's like, it's a individual plant. Maybe it's 2 plants, I don't know, but it's like 20 feet wide by 12 feet tall. And it's called the galloping cactus because it grows in a line, but it'll like reroot itself and come back up. And they produce really delicious fruits that people sell on the street sides in Baja. And huge flowers, just absolutely incredible. I don't know what pollinates them, man. I'm probably some sort of bat or something, but I think that's agave parasana. My friend Jeremy's got a really cool agave nursery in San Diego. He grows all kinds of rare stuff. So I pack it dense. There's a little Echinocereus platyacanthus, aka the bisnaga, which again, that grows like 100 miles south of here. And they get big, they get massive. They're just the most beautiful, just hunks of cam photosynthesis you've ever seen. There's a hectia from, I don't know where the hell it's from. My friend Dylan, he's this bromeliad nut. He sent me a box of all these just brutally mean hectias. I mean, I was pulling spines out of my skin for like 3 months after, but they're some of the coolest, most beautiful plants. And I mean, this thing is it's like a pineapple trying to be an agave, but also covered in white trichomes. So it's got the texture of a Q-tip, but then these really razor sharp teeth on the side. And I don't know where it's from, somewhere in Mexico, but we've got Hectia glomerata here in South Texas, and you get Hectia texensis out in Big Bend. So I mean, right there, I've got you got a little pencil cactus in the background. There's that Parkinsonia, that Texas Palo Verde, which is one of my favorites, super fast growing. That was planted from a 1-gallon pot a year ago. This is Stenocereus, I think it's Huastecana. Huastec, again, native to like 100 miles south of here. And you see, I guess, a lot of like abuelitas and stuff planted you'll see it, you'll encounter it in landscaping a lot in the valley. Nice little horse crippler, Thymophila tephroluca, some boulders. I actually paid for these ones, which I regret because they offer them for free on the side of the road once you go out towards Del Rio. Croton and Canis, Senegalia berlandieri, pack it dense, man. Sydnea tenuifolia, which really easy volunteer. That croton's one of my favorites too. And so this, when I first moved here, I knew maybe an eighth of the plants. How do you get to know them? You bring them home, you plant them, you go spend time with them. Sephora tomentosa. This actually I took a clipping from a botanic garden in Oakland. They said it's fine. And I put that in the ground. It gets like 6 feet tall, gets hairs on it, really cool. Cardone, Pachycereus pringlei, these get upwards of 60 feet tall. Probably won't get that tall here in the valley. This is a little different growing, but agave weberi and cistrocactus in there. I got a Neobucks baumia that I grew from seed over there. I mean, just super dense. And you know what? You just pay attention. Like if it's too hot here, because this is drastically hotter in the summer, maybe I'll move something, or I'll put a little rock in front of it, or take one of those signs for local political campaigns and use that as like a shade cover. This is that Texas Palo Verde. That's a year of growth, man. I mean, it's planting. Oh, I didn't plan it. Yeah, I didn't plan anything. I mean, I would get something and be like, I don't know, where am I going to put this? Oh, all right, yeah, I'll go do that. And then sometimes I'd be like, yeah, you know what, that ebony's probably not, maybe it's not good there. Maybe I'll go move it. So it was just spur of the moment, basically, It was totally just at my whims, and then I would learn and move things and whatever. But Asclepias prostrata, and I forget what agave that is. You can get that damn sedge coming up, that invasive that esculenta, whatever it's, anyway, cypress edulent. Anyway, but I would, you got a weed, but and then this is that Heteropha cathartica, that really cool. I should have planted that a little bit lower. I don't know why I put the caudex up so high. Mexamalva philippes, with those little purple. I thought that little purple icon was the flower, but I was stoked when I got that to germinate. So you just put everything up. This is one of the key for doing native plant gardens here is first ripping up the lawn, getting rid of as much as you can, and then you put a couple cornerstone. If you're working with like a blank palette, you get there's like 4 or 5 cornerstone shrubs you get. Here's 2 of them: Leucophyllum frutescens and Sydnea tenuifolia, skeleton leaf goldeneye and Cenizo. You put Citharexlum in there, aka fiddlewood, whatever. You want these. These are fast growing shrubs that'll get big quick and then provide cover for all the cool little critters, and then other little cacti if you want to put them under it or whatever. But you get those in, and that's what. And then the most important thing is that they're preventing that ground from taking all that infrared and UV light. They're going to keep the ground cooler. They grow fast. They provide shade. They automatically lower the temperature of your plot of land, and they also will provide cover for cool critters and get a bunch of pollen. I mean, all of these plants are great. These should be like 5 essential plants that should be on everyone's list, you know. If people ask me, how do I start killing my lawn? I'm like, well, you just start killing it and plant some of these. And then once these get big, you can plant all the other stuff, little guys, and around it. This, I was stoked on this. This is Prunus texana. This is, AKA the Texas almond. And they're hard to grow. I know Alan's got one in the ground. But they grow on the sand sheet. So automatically it already tells me, all right, they're going to have really weird edaphic, AKA soil things going on. They're probably going to be hard to grow, but I'm going to try it. So I sowed this seed in March in a pot. I just forgot about it. I was like, yeah, they're probably not going to. I mean, I knew the seed was good. It was juicy. It wasn't empty. It had weight to it. But I just forgot about it. And so basically this got a hot stratification. You hear cold stratification in like northern temperate latitudes. Down here in the valley, we need hot stratification. It needs to go through a brutally hot, terrible summer, and then it comes out. These germinated in like October and November once we got a little bit of rain, November, because temperatures finally cooled off. And they all came up. I got like 5 or 6 coming up, and I was there. I just didn't want to mess with the roots. So I was like, I'm just going to plant the whole pot in the ground and forget about it. I don't want to risk losing any of these, whatever. But it's such a cool plant, and it's a native member of the rose family. It's in the same genus as almonds and plums and cherries, whatever. And they're just really hard to grow. And for some reason, you can't find them in a lot of native plant nurseries. So this is another plant along with Gocnadia. I'd love to see someone crack the code on growing, just really nail it down and be able to grow them by the hundreds, because they're so cool. And the branching structure on these, when they grow, they've got that cool divaricating, like zigzag branching that that ebony and blackbrush get, and they're just these tiny little flowers, and they only get like this tall. They're such an ideal shrub. They're so cool, man. One of my favorite species. So I don't know. I hope it can take the clay soils where I live. I think it should be fine. There's I love this too. Every little bird, don't waste any space. Dug up everything here. I got a Bocarnia gracilis there, which again is native to a few hundred miles south. You get that big caudex. And then I planted the 2 native agaves right here, little pups, agave univitata, aka agave lofantha, and agave scabra, which also has some other, they've got text. They're not recognized as species for some reason, but they're lumped in with something else. And then Euphorbia antisyphilitic, whatever. And then I put the mulch on there. I was hesitant to use mulch because I was like, stuff will rot. But then I realized, man, the soil just gets baked here so quick. I mean, in the summer it'll rain, and then the next day you'll have 100-degree temperatures, and it just dries out so quick. I might as well put some mulch down. So that's Chromalina. Forget the common name. Or what's the common name of Chromalina? Yeah, Crucita, butterfly crack. They love it. This thing was just covered. I mean, this is just covered in 30 queen butterflies. Hamatocactus, Hamatocanthus. So that's it. So this is, and this is like a work in progress. I've kind of let it go, but over here it looks, just always working. You can see I got one of those ubiquitous Texas limestone fossils, those Cretaceous oysters. Inoceramus is the genus. Yeah, so I think that's it. And then this is same way that like a hippie who's got like a half pound of weed in his van has a sheriff's department, the Fraternal Order of Police sticker. This is what I've got for the city. So these squares don't come and mess with me, which they actually tried doing, and all I did was just annoy the hell out of them by being very polite but very informative about native plant garden. I just wouldn't shut up about it. I kept talking. I told them everything. I called them every day. I'd love to have you over at my yard. I'd love to show you around. Let me explain to you how transpirational cooling works. And they just finally were like, Jesus Christ, don't worry about it. Don't worry about the ticket. It was drizzling one day, like laughably drizzling, like you wouldn't get wet. And they were like, we're not going to come because it's the rain, but just don't worry about the ticket. And I was like, all right, it's what I thought. Get out of here. Go do something. Go embezzle money or something. So anyway, so it's, yeah, you can see it's a work in progress. I let this part go. This was all inundated with cowpen daisy, with verbicina and whatever. And I just let it go. It looked like hell, but I didn't care. It was, I mean, it looked like a nice hell. It was flowers everywhere, but I just didn't have the time to get to it. So, but I also didn't want it to get inundated with any of the super weedy stuff or the non-native weeds, the worst. And so I just let the verbicina grow for a season, covered it, you know, it amped the butterfly diversity exponentially, and then it was nice. And then when I was finally ready, I took all the verbicina out, mulched, laid down cardboard, mulched it, and started putting in the stuff that I want. So
Inspired.
I started working on the guy 2 houses down. Yeah, just like a drug pusher, just slowly like, let me just give you one, you know? And he's like, I'll tell you, he took one. And I was like, how about 2 more? He's like, okay. And then his wife liked that. And then after that, he was like, okay, well, maybe we'll get more. I was like, I'll get you more, man. Don't worry. And I started bringing mulch over. Now I go and plant stuff when he's not even home. He just, it's like, I'm not even done yet. I've got like 5 things. I planted like a not a hibiscus, malvaviscus arboreus, and a couple, you know, the Sydneas and stuff. And so, because I like walking by that stuff, you know, it's stuff I have to see too. I don't want to see a half dead lawn. It was clear he didn't, you know, he probably didn't have time to think about it, didn't really care too much. And so I was like, I got you, man. Let me just take, you know, I got a friend's house I started doing the same thing on. Just now they're all about killing their lawn, and it spreads, you know. So anyway, I don't know why I did. Oh, you know what? It was to hold down the cardboard. And then I just never removed it. Oh yeah, yeah. No, I started building little lizard hotels and stuff, and like just throwing logs in the air and rocks, whatever. These are all rocks I just brought home from West Texas. I mean, you know, you got to build a habitat. No, they don't care. I mean, I would think what really helped was just being obnoxious and kind. You know, that's what my friend Alan Rockefeller does whenever he studies mushrooms. And so, of course, in a cop's mind, granted, we're slowly getting out of the drug war era, but in a cop's mind, it's any mushroom is a psychoactive illegal mushroom. So Alan had bags of, and the way he collects mushrooms, he dries them, he puts them in a paper bag and dries them on the dash with the vents turned up, the defrosters. Doesn't matter if it's like 90 degrees outside, he pumps the defrosters on to dry these things out, turns his car into a dehydrator because he collects herbarium specimens, then he later sequences the DNA. And so these dumb as a brick cops, no offense to cops, but these ones were particularly dumb as a brick in Tennessee, thought that they were all psychoactive mushrooms. None of them were. And so they took him in and questioned him. They had him for like 8 hours holding him. Of course, they finally got the pests back. None of them were psychoactive. But during that whole time, he just stayed totally cool. And he just repeatedly told them about mushrooms and DNA sequencing and all this unsolicited information until they finally just were like, all right, Jesus Christ, you know, leave us alone. And they just, you know, get out of here. They let him go. But it's, you know, that's what I did with the city when they came and messaged me about having a native plant garden. I was like, look, everything here is something I planted, and I can tell you the genus and species of it. This is what I do for a living. This is, you know, I planted all these things. These are grown intentionally. And in Mission City, the city code even said, it strictly says, you know, it only applies to uncultivated weeds. Well, these were all cultivated. What do you want me to do? These were intentionally cultivated. Just because you don't, you know, in your worldview, you've never experienced this before and it's new to you, that doesn't mean it's not this is all cultivated stuff. This is a garden. You know, these are things that grew here for millions of years before we got here. They have a right to be here, and this is what I'm into, and this is my property. So, and I just stayed cool, and I was nice. And they finally just, you know, but now, I mean, I think we need to keep going back to their city council meetings and just, because they don't care. They don't care. They'll let it fall off. They don't care about this stuff. I mean, people that have native plant gardens, at least where I live, I'm sure will still get messed with. I mean, maybe this inspector's cool, you know, but then he quits and some other guy takes over in 6 months, and then that guy starts messing with people. I mean, you know, I want to keep going back and make sure that we get something written in so that this doesn't happen, so that this is seen as normal. It's not normal to have a lawn in a desert. It's weird. It's gross. It's sick, honestly. This is what needs to be normalized. This stuff. This is what was here for millions of years before we got here. This is what's going to, you know, save us and save the landscape. And I don't think that's hyperbolic to say that either. I mean, there's some really hard things coming our way climatically. So anyway, agaves, I always love agaves, you know. It might sunburn on these outer leaves, but the new leaves that are produced will be, when they come out in the full sun, the new tissue will have enough of that farina, that blue wax on it to protect them. So I think that's it. There's a Bocarnia hookeri. There's the Texas spiny lizard that likes to hang out right here every morning. Oh, this was cool. Yeah, this is a Ipomea, I think it's carnea, but that thing is just covered in moths at night. It died back to the ground right now, but it's just covered in moths. It's so cool. Hundreds of moths at night. Yeah, that's it. Okay, cool. Well, that's it. Thanks. Thanks for being patient.